Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're diving into something we all inevitably have to face, but basically never want to talk about. We're exploring a profound text in Eastern Christian theology focusing on the mystery of death, or as it's beautifully put, سر الموت باللغة العربية. You know, modern society kind of treats death as this massive medical failure, right? Or just a super uncomfortable taboo that we shove under the rug. But this tradition, it looks you right in the eye. It's the ultimate universal reality. But what if literally everything we've been conditioned to fear about the grave is actually just a huge misunderstanding? Let's get into it. To give you an idea of just how desperate we are to avoid the grave, think about the famous surrealist painter Pablo Picasso. Get this. As he was getting close to his 100th birthday, he literally threw an absolute fit. He was so mad at modern science because they hadn't figured out a way to extend human life to 150 or even 200 years. And honestly, doesn't society today totally mirror Picasso's frantic desire to just outrun the clock? We pour billions of dollars into longevity research, cryogenics, anti-aging serums, the whole shebang. Rich or poor, we all share this deeply ingrained, frantic desire to keep the curtain from closing. We treat death like it's the ultimate enemy that just needs to be hacked or cured. And this brilliantly illustrates a thought from the philosopher Blaise Pascal. He hit the nail on the head when he said that man is but a reed, the most feeble thing in nature. But, and here's the kicker, he is a thinking reed. You see, unlike a tree or an animal that just lives and eventually perishes, we are uniquely aware of our own mortality. We're the only ones who know for a fact that we're going to die. That conscious awareness makes us so much nobler than the universe that ultimately crushes us, for sure, but it also creates this heavy, unavoidable psychological burden. Just imagine waking up every single day knowing there's a ticking clock, but you have zero clue what the timer says. That is the quiet dread humanity carries around. Moving into part 1, the innate terror and mystery of the unknown abyss. Historically, humanity has always looked at this unknown abyss with absolute dread, trying to make sense of an ending that just feels so incredibly unnatural to us. And when you compare the secular philosophical view to the Eastern Orthodox Christian view, wow, the contrast is absolutely staggering. Secular thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, they saw death as just an absurd end. Like, life was basically meaningless because it's eventually erased by death anyway, making all our struggles kind of pointless. Arthur Schopenhauer thought of it as merely a sleep where your individuality is permanently forgotten. They leave the whole problem totally unanswered, offering this bleak, chilling despair. But the structured theological view we're unpacking today, it sees it entirely differently. Not as a dead end, but as a bridge. A highly purposeful, beautiful beginning to true life. Okay, let's dive into this in part 2, Sin, the Origin of Spiritual Death. To really grasp this theological perspective, we have to trace the dark origins of death right back to its roots. In this tradition, death was never part of humanity's original design. It actually entered the human experience through the fall of Adam and Eve. It's framed as the ultimate, tragic consequence of turning away from God, who is the very source of life. And if we look at the timeline, the tragedy unfolds chronologically. First, you have the fall in Eden, the initial transgression, breaking that relationship. But then, incredibly, the very first human to physically fall captive to death wasn't Adam or Eve. It was Abel, a righteous man, and the first victim of murder. From that violent, highly unnatural entry point, mortality basically spread like a contagion, bringing us to our present reality, the universal reign of death over every single living creature. But right here, the source material makes a really critical distinction. Spiritual death is defined as the separation of the soul from God. And that, my friends, is the true tragedy. Physical death, on the other hand, is just the separation of the soul from the body. Think of it kind of like this. Physical death is actually just a symptom of a much deeper root disease. If you have a terrible cough, the cough isn't the core problem, right? It's just a symptom of an infection in your lungs. It's the same thing here. The deterioration of the physical body is literally just a symptom. The underlying fatal disease is spiritual separation from the source of life, which is what brings true chaos and despair into human existence. And this brings us to part 3, the paradox of death as divine favor. Prepare yourself, because here is where the plot twists. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we shift entirely away from the somber reality of the grave and step into absolute theological wonder. Look at this profound observation from St. John Chrysostom. Sin gives birth to death, and death kills sin. Divine wisdom completely flipped the script. The very thing that came into the world as the ultimate punishment was actually transformed by the Creator into the ultimate cure. It is an extraordinary paradox. The weapon that was used against humanity gets turned right back on itself to secure our salvation. No way, right? But it makes so much sense. Think about how physical death actually functions as a divine mechanism in this framework. Without it, human tyranny, suffering, and sin, they would literally be eternal. Can you imagine a tyrant who could just rule forever, or a sickness that never, ever ends? Death actually puts an end to earthly misery. It forcibly curbs human arrogance and pride. I mean, the grave is the great equalizer, right? No matter how much power or wealth you accumulate, the rich and the poor end up in the exact same soil. Most importantly, it prevents evil from becoming immortal. It basically forces us into a humility that we would never, ever naturally choose for ourselves. I really want you to actively visualize this next metaphor presented in the texts because it's deeply comforting. Death is merely a change of clothes. In this view, your physical body is quite literally just a garment for your soul. It's a coat you've worn your entire life. It gets frayed, tired, sick, and worn out. So at the end of your life, this garment is temporarily taken off and placed in the earth, kind of like a seed, only so it can be renewed, washed, and perfected later on. You, the actual essence of who you are, aren't destroyed in the slightest. You're just taking off an old coat to get ready for something far, far better. Which leads us directly to part 4, Christ's victory over the abyss. So how did this massive transformation of death actually happen? Theology tells us the Creator himself stepped directly into the human narrative to permanently break the power of the grave. Let's sequence these incredible theological events. First, the crucifixion, the ultimate sacrifice. Second, the astonishing descent into hell. But listen, he doesn't enter as a victim. The Creator of the universe enters the abyss as a conqueror, intentionally breaking down the doors of the underworld. That leads to step 3, the definitive defeat of death from the inside out. By entering the realm of the dead, life itself shattered its power. And finally, the resurrection. Christ came out of Hades as an absolute victor, permanently changing the human trajectory. This creates the most spectacular before and after you could possibly imagine. Before Christ, death was this terrifying, unbeatable monster that held all of humanity hostage. Nobody escaped its finality. But after Christ, death is a defeated enemy. St. John Chrysostom notes an incredible detail here. He says death now only has the name of death, but no longer the reality. Think about what that actually means. A defeated enemy might still wear the uniform, it might still carry the title, but its weapon has been completely emptied of ammo. The sting is permanently gone. Because of this ultimate victory, what used to be a terrifying, dark, dead end has been fundamentally rebuilt into a bridge leading directly to eternity. Moving to our final phase, Part 5, Life Beyond the Grave. So what actually happens in the immediate aftermath of passing on? What does the soul experience when that physical garment is finally removed? The text introduces this fascinating metaphorical concept known as the toll houses for the soul, or in Arabic, Jibiyat al-Nufus. This represents a state where the soul, having left the body, undergoes a really detailed process of accountability. It begins its silent, profound transition into the future life. And in this framework, accountability isn't just some rigid courtroom scene. It's a deep spiritual review, a look at what the soul loved, what it clung to, and what it really gave its allegiance to while it was wearing that earthly garment. But all of this leaves us with a really profound question, one I want you to ponder right now. If we know it's an inevitable bridge that we all absolutely have to cross, why is the exact hour of our death hidden from us? Have you ever thought about that? Why is the exact moment the curtain falls kept as an absolute secret from every single human being? So, the crucial point is that the text suggests something completely counterintuitive. This ignorance is actually a profound act of divine love. The blessing of the unknown hour keeps humanity humble. Let's be real. If we knew exactly when we were going to die, human nature dictates we would likely live a life of careless sin. We'd indulge our worst impulses only to panic and attempt a shallow repentance at the very last second. Instead, not knowing the hour maintains our spiritual alertness. It acts as this constant, gentle nudge, keeping us vigilant, encouraging us to live fully and focus on what truly matters every single day. Because any day could be the day we cross that bridge. Which brings us to our final thought. If death is fundamentally a defeated enemy, if it truly is just a change of clothes and a bridge to true life, a concept so beautifully captured when studying سر الموت باللغة العربية, what are you so afraid of leaving behind today? I want you to let that paradoxical truth inspire you. Let it challenge you to completely rethink your daily anxieties, your fears, and exactly how you spend your precious time. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.